the ADHD. I mean, if you're gonna like label some of these kids with these stuff, I think it lowers like their self-esteem on how they feel about themselves. Okay.
So I was doing a lot of research, which I don't have in front of me anymore because the internet's not working, but I was doing a lot of research about the labeling in schools, and there was a lot of studies that were done of teachers, because teachers are the ones that basically are the first people to tell a parent or to notice the kid's signs and symptoms, because the kid is in a group and he's not acting as if like any other kid is acting. So the teacher is the one to give the kid, to tell the parents that they should, take him to the doctor to probably be diagnosed.
So what you're saying is they're typically the first.
They're typically the first person to notice. So a lot of studies were done about kids with ADHD and what the teacher's role is in it. And the fact is that they're with all kids and all labeling. There's self-prophecy, like Tina was saying, with the labeling, and the teacher automatically has a negative outlook towards the kid who has ADHD. Basically, there were studies done where kids were put in a room and they were given, and the teachers were there to observe their behavior, and the teachers were told, this kid has ADHD and this kid is normal. And they were supposed to, just like, they were supposed to evaluate the kid on their behavior. And they automatically lowered the behavior score for the kid with ADHD, even though the kid didn't actually have ADHD. So it just shows that, like, as soon as you're told this kid has ADHD, there's a negative impact. So that's just the teacher. Imagine all the friends in the social setting that they're in. They know that the kid has ADHD, so they automatically treat them differently.
And it just sort of snowballs from there.
Because the teachers don't know a lot about it.
Through elementary grades, you have different kinds of food like children. You can see that. Different groups of kids hang out with each other. There's a normal kid, to make it broad, there's a normal kids and then, per se, people who aren't as normal as, the normal kids. So, the normal kids, go to school, they hang out with their friends, they talk, lunchtime, etc. But, the kids who sort of either think different, they act different, or they're younger compared to older kids in their grade, they're labeled as the weirdos, So that's making, I feel like, the labeling system.
There was also a study where they label boys more than girls, and it's like that boys are more hyper when they're younger. But there was a quote that I got from a psychologist saying, if he can't sit still, it may be simply because he's 5, and the other kids are like 6 years old. So I find that like another factor when it comes to considering labeling.
That's true though, because most kids that are in between the age of 3 to 5 and are in kindergarten, you can't label a child and say, that kid, obviously most little kids don't open up, they're too shy, or some are just, they have that hyperactivity, but it doesn't mean they have ADHD.
So you're saying that not only is it, well, since boys are diagnosed more, you could say that instead it's like more of a social thing, where it's just how boys happen to be, and you're saying, what Stephen was saying before, it has a stigma attached to it, I guess is what you're trying to, you and Hannah were trying to say.
And also, Alexa, on your study that you found that the boys were diagnosed more, it's also because boys have more of the hyperactive part of ADHD, and girls are more of the inattentive. And inattentive is not disruptive. It's just the kid's not doing well at school, but they're not disrupting the classroom. So therefore, the teacher's not going to necessarily bring it up to the parents and saying, you should go look and get a diagnosis maybe, because they're not disrupting anything. As long as the teacher has control over the classroom, she doesn't necessarily, I wouldn't say she doesn't care, but she doesn't necessarily notice. But the boys, they're just, in general, boys are more active, so the hyperactivity comes out even more, and therefore the teacher will notice.
Yes?
Just, I hear a lot about the opinion that people are expressing their feeling that labeling at such an early stage of ADHD creates a feeling in that kid himself that they're a little bit different than the other kids in the class. Do you think, not just looking at the recent development, what happened in Connecticut last Friday, that very sad story with the kid, do you think, not just discussing ADHD, do you think early diagnosis of various different type of illnesses or conditions, do you think that creates a type of feeling within these children that they're different, and that starts the snowball effect of later on creating issues that people often too late see? Are we creating these issues by early diagnosis and changing these kids' lives?
So I'd like to bring you in. Basically, I think what he's saying is the effects of having just early diagnoses in general having a negative effect. Do you have anything to say on that?
With that, they do diagnose other disorders, and they do take it as ADHD or a misdiagnosis of ADHD. And it also goes into a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists that see it, because not only are they not taking the time to really be critical with when they see the symptoms, but they just kind of turn it away and then maybe they can go on it, or maybe you can prescribe this to them, they could get better. But they don't take the time to actually go with them, with the process of the job, and try to learn it more time than to understand that it really is something about them that we don't have.
Okay,
I just have a opinion. I think when you start labeling people, there is a negative effect to it, because it's like everyone wants to feel like they belong. And if you feel like you're different, then I think that creates an issue.
So,
I think it's the biggest problem of all is that nobody should think that they're different. Everybody is different, and that should be the message that's given.
That's what I was trying to head towards. Labeling kids normal and labeling kids unnormal. That's where it comes from. Like you were saying, it's a snowball effect. That statement stays whether you realize it or not. Every life choice you make comes from elementary.
Malky, is there something? Okay. It's interesting that you say that, because you could also say, if we don't do, you could argue that there is a purpose for labeling, because obviously if you have a diagnosis, then anyone who looks at that diagnosis could have an idea of what you need. So my next question, to tie into that, what are the alternatives that we can think of, or that are already out there, to deal with how things such as ADHD are labeled and treated? So if you're against labeling, if you think there's a stigma associated with it, is there anything else that we can do? Is there anything else the schools can do?
Try and work with the students instead of try different strategies.
Right here, I have some behavior strategies that can help children with ADHD, like create a routine, get organized, avoid distraction, like turning off the television, radio, and computer games, especially when your child is doing homework. Limit choices, offer a choice between two things, like for example, like an outfit, a meal, or a toy, so that your child isn't overwhelmed or overstimulated. Change your interaction with your child. Instead of long-winded explanation, use clear, brief directions to remind your child of responsibilities. Use goals and rewards. Discipline effectively. Instead of yelling or spanking, use timeouts or removal of privileges as a sequence for inappropriate behavior. Help your child discover a talent. And all kids need to experience success to feel good about themselves. Finding out what your child does well, whether it's sports, art, or music, can boost social skills and self-esteem.
So,
what is that?
Those are strategies to help kids with ADHD.
It's not only, sorry,
no.
It's not only to the teachers and the parents, but the doctors as well. Because even though the teachers and the parents are aware of what the children is going through and what happened, they only go to that one doctor, and that one doctor can miss a million things. And another thing is when they go to one doctor, they also go to another doctor, because usually the doctor after that can actually see the underlying health problems that actually cause things, or that they see that the main things that they have, miss that symptom or miss that sign or something.
So I think I'm hearing two things here. I'm hearing one, as opposed to, I guess, medication and treatment. If you have a child with ADHD, you can take steps for, say, modifying behavior, getting him or her more involved in hobbies that he likes. And you're saying another solution is to get a second opinion because there's a lot of misdiagnosis, I think is what you're getting across. Okay, Malky?
So I'm going back to treatment that you were talking about. I noticed that you said the first thing that they did was prescribe you a drug. But I mean, a lot of people really don't, drugs mess with your mind, there's a lot of side effects that you don't know about. Besides those behavior treatments, in schools when they have problems, before labeling and misdiagnosing and saying, oh, it's ADHD, even before they even say maybe they have ADHD, can't they give them tools, the kids tools to work with, so that if they do have ADHD, there's no labeling, there's no nothing, because they have the tools, and that way, with those tools, they don't even need drug treatment. I notice that very often. I have nieces and nephews, and some of them do have ADHD, but their parents are not into the labeling, their parents are not into the drugs, so they give them tools to work with in order, instead of this labeling and drug thing, they just give them tools.
I was just going to say, first off, how many of y'all worked with kids before? Everybody.
Well,
Alright, so I've done the same thing, and I've known, like, for the most part, when kids tend to do kind of, when you think they have ADHD, it's a lot of it's just basically on interest, on what they're interested in doing. Because I know some kids just have too much energy to sit around and hear somebody talk, but when you're giving them an assignment to do, they tend to do it. I just think a lot of the times when they're always active, it's just more like what's interesting to them or not.
Yeah. I have a comment because my daughter, she was in 3rd grade last year, and she has an issue with like sitting still. So what the teacher did was like she'll give her like little tasks to do, like if she had to pass out crayons or something just to keep her like active. But the thing that I was most happy about was this teacher caught on to this. Like she noticed this kid cannot sit still. I mean, if it was another teacher where she wasn't aware of what was going on, she probably would have said like the kid is being disruptive and it would have caused a problem. But she actually noticed there was an issue, so she just just gave her little stuff to do to just keep her like occupied.
Okay, Alexa, Rachel, it sounded like it looked like you had something you wanted to add before.
It is true, exactly what Tina said. Like my little sister, she's 11 years old now. I shared with all them in the beginning when we started talking about the topic. The teacher basically told my parents, they were labeling her. They told her she needs to go to a doctor. She can't sit still. She can't learn this. She just has test anxiety. She has anxiety where she doesn't want to sit there and try it. She wants to just get up, walk away, and then come back. She was like me when I was younger. I kept it to myself. I never said anything.
So branching off of that, what would you then propose as maybe like a possible alternative?
I feel like if somebody would sit there and try and help her, like exactly what Tina said, if you can't sit for a certain amount of time because you're fidgety, like necessarily you don't have ADHD, you just have anxiety or you just have that.
Not even anxiety.
It's just you just can't sit.
Yeah,
you know, like
I know I have.
I have it still. I can't sit for hours. But
it
there's certain ways that you could work with the child and not just jump into certain procedures.
Another thing is education as well. A lot of people do not take the time or the patience or have the patience to work with children and to actually find the tools. So what they do is as an easy treatment, an easy way to have them to sit down for 30 hours is medication.
Those drugs normally sedate the kids, right?
Yeah, they only sedate them. They don't. But it's just I used to depend on the Adderall. I used to think, oh, I used to get straight A's when I'm getting Adderall. No, it's because if you work hard and you're sitting there with certain procedures, you can. If you set your mind to something, you could do it. You don't have to reply and depend on medication.
What about those?
Oh yeah, no.
What about those students who actually do have ADHD and they are diagnosed with ADHD? You're talking a lot about misdiagnosis, and those kids don't need to be diagnosed with ADHD. But what about the ones that actually do have ADHD?
So the ones that do have ADHD, there's a proper procedure that they should follow. One is parents and child, and it's called the multimodal treatment. The parents and child